So now we're moving on with Alex and the atheistic worldview regarding morality. And I guess we asked the question, is there morality in, we asked it a couple different ways. I guess what is morality in the atheistic worldview?
Essentially, a lot of the times morality boils down to almost a utilitarian view of, hey, let's not cause suffering, and even beyond that, let's try and create happiness, that goes beyond a lack of suffering into, people can experience joy, they can experience happiness, they can move on with their lives and create.
Where does it come from?
It's, science is still working on this one in terms of, evolutionary psychologists and anthropologists are thinking, hey, it came from when we were, 10,000 or so years ago, first starting to create cultures and stuff. We needed a way to congregate together, and we needed to have rules because, here's the example my cultural psych professor gave actually just last week. Is if everyone were a rational self-actor, let's take voting. Your vote is probably never going to change an election. I mean, you as a single one individual, your vote will never change an election. It hasn't in the history of the U.S., probably never will. So if you think about it, what are the dangers of going out and vote? You might get run over by a bus, you have to pay for gas, or you have to walk, which expends energy. You can, get run over by a bus on crossing the street over to get to the poll. Overall, considering that your single vote is never going to change an election, why are you going to go through all these steps to go and vote? It's because if everyone went through the exact same self-interested actor or rational self-interest, then no one would vote, and you'd run into a problem because nothing would get done. So instead what happened is, we're given this toolkit by our genes, by our evolution, to be able to create culture and learning and language. And so essentially we create rules as a culture, as a society, as a group, saying, okay, sometimes you need to go out and vote, even if it's not in your exact best interest. In this case, in modern America, we call that our civic duty. To go to jury duty or other things.
So morality comes from the genes and from the environment or society.
Yeah.
And if the question, I guess the follow-up question to that is, that I guess by definition would mean morality is subjective?
To a certain extent. This is actually one of the debates that are going on right now in terms of cultural psych and where we are as a culture. Cultures produce different solutions to environmental problems. There are all kinds of different houses in the world, all kinds of different types of architecture, but essentially they all boil down to, how do we keep the weather out of a particular area so that we can continue living comfortably? But each culture kind of does that differently. Well, in terms of morals and morality, each culture solves environmental problems, essentially, how do we get along as a culture in our environment, in our ecology? And so they create a moral system, and each one does it differently. Now, when you're trying to say values, is one culture's moral system better than another's, that's where you start running into problems.